Okay, on part 8, we left off with Amanda Thayer's interview, and going into part 9, we're having Nick Thayer, her husband's interview with the FBI. So let's just get right into it. Nicholas Thayer, that we will call Nick, was interviewed at his residence. After being advised the identity of the interviewing agent and the nature of the interview, Nick provided the following information. Nick is employed as a media director for Prop Incorporation. Nick is employed as a media director for Prop Incorporation. Nick obtained a high school diploma. Nick's wife, Amanda Thayer, and Shanann Watts set up a play date for the kids in approximately April of 2017. Nick met Chris Watts at the play date at the park in Frederick. That summer, the Thayers saw them almost every weekend at each other's homes and going out to dinner. In the fall of 2017, Chris started getting into running. Nick and Chris ran at times through the winter on weekends. Chris said he was working out at the Frederick Recreation Center. They didn't share much personal talk. Chris was self-contained and didn't offer much. Nick was also friends with Shanann, and they all got along. Nick and Chris mostly communicated through texting about going for runs, sports in general, or making plans for the weekend. There were not many phone calls. Nick and Amanda moved to Thornton, Colorado in June of 2018. The Thayers saw Shanann and Chris less. Shanann and the kids went to North Carolina 6 weeks in June of 2018. Chris joined them in North Carolina during their last week there, and they all flew back together. Nick and Amanda saw Chris on the 4th of July at the fireworks show in Thornton. Nick asked Chris a question along the lines of, "What's it like to be a bachelor?" And Chris responded that it was weird being in an empty home and that he was working out all the time. Chris said that Shanann got upset because he missed one of her phone calls. Chris added that anytime he's working out, he runs upstairs when she calls, and he hides that he's doing stuff without Shanann and the girls. Nick had no other indication from Chris about the status of their relationship other than those examples. Nick thought that perhaps Shanann and Chris were married in 2012. Nick stated that he and Chris didn't see each other much and didn't talk much. However, they both signed up for a running race in September of 2018. Well, Chris never made that race. Chris sent Nick a text message photograph of his race shirt and bib number. So he already had his shirt and his number, but he never made the race. The two exchanged a few texts regarding the upcoming race. Chris and Shanann got back from North Carolina. Shanann and Amanda talked for about 45 minutes. Amanda told Nick that Chris and Shanann weren't doing well in their marriage. Amanda asked if Nick saw the post Shanann made about Celeste in North Carolina, which Nick said he had. Nick and Amanda thought maybe that issue was part of the problem. Nick was aware that Shanann didn't get along with Chris's parents. Nick received a text from Amanda while he was at work. Amanda told him that Shanann wanted them to watch the kids. Shanann and Chris went away for the weekend of 8/17, and Nick said okay. Nick and Amanda got back from their Kentucky trip on Monday, 8/13, at around 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. Nick texted Chris to see if Chris wanted to do some runs before the September run. Nick provided the following text from his cell phone. Monday, 4:07 p.m. "Hey man, we just got back into town. When can you run?" And Chris responded, "Not sure, man. I can't find Shanann or the kids. Haven't heard from them all day. The cops are here. I will keep you posted. Nick." Whoa, what? That's crazy, man. Is there anything I can do? And Chris replies, I don't know, man. It's very odd right now. Nick, we can head up there, bring you some food. We're here for you. Nick and Amanda went to Chris's home and rang the bell. Chris answered the door. In describing Chris's appearance, Nick stated it wasn't Chris. Nick stated that Chris appeared different, overwhelmed, like, what is going on? At that point, the cops were gone. Nick and Amanda and Chris stood inside by the front door. Nick and Amanda were asking Chris questions about what happened, but Nick could not remember exactly what they said. Chris told Nick and Amanda the following. Nan and Chris were having marital issues. Nick stated that Amanda spoke up and said that Shanann had told her about the marital issues. That morning, when Chris woke up for work, he told Shanann that he wanted to separate. Chris told her before he went to work because he wanted to tell her in person rather than by text or phone. Chris left for work. Nick stated that Chris did not comment on how Shanann was doing when he left. When Chris was at work, Nicole Atkinson began texting him that she couldn't get a hold of Shanann and that Nicole was at their house. Chris headed for home. On the way, he called the girls' school and he told they hadn't checked in. Chris told the school to keep the girls on the wait list. When Chris got home, the cops were there and did a walk around. The cops came back with a warrant for a more in-depth search. The cops offered Chris a chance to walk around and search with them, but he said he'd just wait outside. Nick, Amanda, and Chris continued talking at the kitchen table, and Chris continued. Chris said the cops took Shanann's cell phone. The neighbors showed the cops the security footage of him loading his truck and leaving that morning, but the footage showed nothing after that. The video doorbell didn't show anything. Chris saw a credit card charge for a taxi cab, but didn't know anything else about that. Chris didn't know what to think or do. Chris stated that while the three of them were brainstorming about what they could be doing, Chris stated, "Do I walk out into the field to look for someone?" And Nick stated that Chris made no comments about the fact that Shanann was gone, but all of her stuff was still there. When Amanda mentioned Shanann's items that were still in the house, Chris confirmed those items as being her phone, purse, wallet, wedding ring, car seats, and the kids' medicine. Based on all of those items being left behind, Chris indicated he thought Shanann just left. Nick stated that Chris was in the process of calling and texting Shanann's friends. Amanda said she heard about a potential Amber Alert. Chris said he had been contacting emergency rooms before Nick and Amanda arrived. Nick stated that Chris seemed like he was just trying to process everything. He put his head down a lot and he didn't know what to do. Chris told Nick he didn't want to talk to the news media because they might pry and turn his words around. Chris knew how it would look and he would be public enemy number one, Nick stated. He was worried about that. He was worried about that because Shanann's mother told him not to do it. Everything he just said he was worried about is what Miss Rusek told him they would do. I mean, she was concerned about him too at the same time. Then she started having doubts about him herself for damn good reason. Her mother instincts kicked in overdrive. Amanda invited Chris to stay at the Thayer's house. Chris said he wouldn't that night, but he would the next night. Amanda and Chris went home around 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. When they got home, I should say Amanda and Nick. That's a typo for damn sure. So I'm going to say it correctly. Amanda and Nick went home at around 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. When they got home, they texted Chris at 9:33 p.m. and they told Chris they had stopped at McDonald's and the gas station at I-25 and Highway 52 to see if anyone there saw anything, and Chris responded at 9:43 p.m. stating, "Thanks, man." On Tuesday morning, 8:14, Nick texted Chris to see if he was going to work. Chris said he didn't get much sleep and was going to stay home. Nick and Amanda took their daughter to school, and Nick texted Chris at 8:30 a.m. on 8:14 to ask if he had heard anything from the police, and Chris responded, "Nothing yet." The two texted back and forth briefly. Nick and Amanda drove to Chris's house. There, the news media started contacting them. When they arrived at Chris's house, they found Chris to be tired, not himself, and overwhelmed. The three sat at the kitchen table and they talked about the possibility of Nick and Amanda talking to the media about the media talking to Chris. During the afternoon on Tuesday, Nick overheard a telephone call between Chris and either his mother or Shanann's mother. Chris made a comment along the lines of, quote, "The longer this goes on, the more I worry that they might be hurt or in danger," unquote. Chris stated that he had received a text from a realtor on Monday night. Chris told Nick and Amanda that he and Shanann had talked about putting the house on the market. The house was too big and too much of a financial burden, and they wanted to downgrade. Chris said he wasn't sure if that is what made Shanann mad at him, although Chris hadn't talked about Shanann being mad before that moment. Chris was wondering if that's what started all of this. Chris made no mention about having any girlfriends. Nick and Amanda left Chris's house just before 4 p.m. in order to pick up their daughter from school. They offered to help Chris stay at their house that night, and Chris agreed to it. Chris said he would be over in a little bit. When Nick and Amanda arrived at their home, Nick called Chris, and Chris said he was coming over. Chris called Nick about 10 minutes later, said that Fox News was still in his front yard. Chris was concerned about how it would look if he was seen leaving his home with a bag of clothes. At around 6:20 p.m., Nick texted Chris again, and Chris said he was just leaving his house. Approximately 20 minutes later, Chris called. He told Nick that Frederick Police Department wanted him to come talk to an FBI agent, and Nick responded via text stating that he and Amanda would go there and offer support, and Chris responded, "Thanks, man." Nick and Amanda went to the Frederick Police Department, and Chris came out at around 11 p.m. Chris gave a brief summary of the interview, but they all decided to talk more once they got home. At the house, Chris said the interview was intense. He stated it was like being interviewed by 3 people, all by one person. He stated they had his phone and asked him all about stuff in his phone. They asked him about his weight loss and who is she. They would disappear for 15 minutes and would start over when they came back. He was getting the same questions in a different form. He was grilled and asked, "So why did you do it?" At the end of the interview, the agent told him he did a good job. Nick told Chris he had been texting with a private investigator friend. Nick gave Chris some lawyer contact information upon the advice of his friend, the private investigator. Chris was appreciative and went to bed. Chris said he was planning on going to work until his dad arrived. On Monday, August the 15th, Chris told Nick that his work told him not to come in. Chris left the house at 9:30 a.m. to get his dad from the airport. Nick and Amanda went to work. Nick stated that he found it strange that Chris didn't know if Shanann had her Apple Watch since it wasn't in the charger. Nick knew that Shanann always wore her Apple Watch and always had her phone with her. Chris never made other comments over time about whether Shanann slept while wearing her Apple Watch. Nick stated that he would preserve all of his call and text data. And so that is the end of Nick's report. And this is going to be just a cover sheet of Nick's interview. And then here we have the FBI, date of entry 8/27. Nicole Kessinger. Nicole Kessinger was interviewed at the Majestic View Park. Her father, Dwayne Kessinger, was also present. After being advised of the identity of the interviewing agent and the nature of the interview, Kessinger provided the following information. If you haven't saw that interview done at the park with her dad, you can go see it on our channel here, and I will also link it at the end of the video. Kessinger works as a contractor for Anadarko Petroleum in the Human Health and Safety Department. She met Christopher Watts in approximately June of 2018 through the course of working at Anadarko, and they began to talk and hang out. Kessinger was aware that Watts was married and had children, and he had told her that he was separating from his wife. Kessinger was aware that Watts' wife and children were missing at the time of the interview. Kessinger and Watts' relationship developed more than a friendship, and it became intimate. Watts had told Kessinger that he loved her approximately 2 weeks prior to the time of this interview. While Kessinger and Watts had discussed a potential future together, Kessinger wanted to wait until Watts' divorce became final before advancing their relationship any further. Okay, well, she had done slept with him. He had done lived with her since basically he supposedly met her. They supposedly met in June, towards the end of June. And that's pretty much when he moved in with her. And he pretty much lived with her until this happened. So, yeah, that's a pretty lame way of saying it, when she's sitting there saying she wanted to wait till their divorce was final before they advanced their relationship any further. Well, how much damn farther can you get it, really, besides just getting married? I mean, they were already living together. They were already having sex 4 or 5 times a day. They were pretty much joined hip to hip. They even worked together. So how much more advancement is she talking about other than literally just getting married and having kids? I mean, that's pretty damn advanced where they had already went. So anyway, that's my opinion, period. I don't know how much more advancing she could be talking about there, but anyway. Kessinger frequently spoke with Watts via telephone and text message. She believes her father and Watts are the only individuals aware of their relationship. Watts was looking for a 2-bedroom apartment to rent following his divorce, and Kessinger was going to help locate a suitable place the week of August the 13th, 2018. Watts was planning to list his house for sale on Monday, August the 13th. Watts' wife had located the realtor. Kessinger's parents lived far apart when she was growing up, which was difficult for her. So, she did not want Watts to create that type of situation for his daughters. Kessinger suggested Watts look for 3-bedroom apartments so his daughters could have their own rooms, but Watts told her that he could not afford such an apartment. Watts told Kessinger that he wanted to move into an apartment in order to save some money, and he told Kessinger that his wife may stay in or near Frederick, Colorado, but he did not think she could afford a house by herself. Kessinger was aware that Watts' wife worked as a sales representative of some type related to fitness or vitamins, which required her to have social media presence. Kessinger last saw Watts in person on Friday, August the 11th, 2018, Watts and Kessinger went out to dinner at the Lazy Dog restaurant near I-25 and 144th Avenue. Kessinger believes they met at approximately 5 or 6 p.m. and she was home at around 10 p.m., possibly sooner. Watts had hired a babysitter to watch his daughters until 10 p.m. Kessinger believes this was one of the few times she had been in public with Watts. That's ridiculous. They went out all the time together. I mean, this was her first interview, but later on, she just talked about all these places they went together. So, yeah. Otherwise, they were usually at her residence. Kessinger did not want to go to Watts' house, as that was a space he shared with his wife. Kessinger and Watts had traveled together to the sand dunes during the week of the 4th of July, and she believes they had left Saturday and returned on Sunday. Kessinger and Watts nearly always took Kessinger's truck if they went places. She had seen Watts driving a white vehicle, but they only used the vehicle on one occasion for just a quick errand. On Monday, August the 13th, 2018, Watts told Kessinger that his family was gone, and he did not know where they were. Kessinger believed that maybe Watts' wife had become fed up and just left, so she was not overly concerned at first. Kessinger became concerned on Tuesday, August the 14th, after family had still not been heard from or located, so she contacted law enforcement in order to advise law enforcement about her relationship and offer possible assistance locating the missing persons. Watts did not know Kessinger had been in contact with law enforcement. Bullshit. I do not believe that. That's my opinion. Sorry, but that is my opinion. I believe Chris very well knew that she had been in contact with them, and she didn't even contact them until she didn't even go talk to the law enforcement until enforcement was already aware of her. So, I mean, I'm just saying that is my opinion. And we all have them, right? Rourke had his own theory and opinion, y'all. A lot of people gets very upset when someone speaks their opinion about this case or even gives any sort of theory about this case, but really this case is all about thoughts and opinions. I mean, think about Rourke when he was standing up there, right? When he was standing up there at the plea deal, what did he do? That whole spiel he did about the first time anybody heard about the autopsies and how the girls had their how Bella's mouth was. I mean, nobody had ever heard that, not even the family. I mean, he threw that all out there. Boom. The media, everybody heard about it at the same time, which was tacky in my opinion, because it was a plea deal. I mean, it wasn't going to change his sentencing. So, I mean, it was kind of tacky that Rourke threw that out there. That was pointless that he done that. That did not have to be done. That should have been told to the families in privacy, not in front of the whole world. Anyway, not even getting started on that. But when Rourke stood there and made his spiel to the public, to the world, to the families, he was basing his story on his thoughts, opinions, theories, whatever you want to call it. But he was doing it straight from exactly what we are reading right here. Straight from it. His theory, thoughts, and opinions was one thing that I can just throw out right now, that he had no clue if that was why it was done, but that was his thought. And he said, and I can't quote it to the exact wording, but you'll all know what I'm talking about. When he said he wanted to separate them even in death. Right? You know the part I'm talking about putting each girl in different tanks. Okay. How does Rourke know that's why he did that? Chris didn't tell him that. He doesn't have any proof that that is why he put them in different tanks. Is because he wanted them separated, even in death, right? Nobody knows why he done that. Chris even says, whatever his damn reasons was, he says he don't know why he did it. But he says for damn sure it wasn't because he wanted to separate any of them, whatever. At the same time, that was Rourke's theory. That was Rourke's opinion, and that was his thought from reading what we're reading right here. Same thing. And of course, he had to make a story into his thoughts and opinions of what he had gathered from this discovery document. And his thought and opinion was he wanted to separate them even in death. Well, that was a theory, right? That was his thought, opinion. So I guess the point I'm trying to get here is, before you go and freak out on someone about having a thought or an opinion or even a theory of what the whys, even the family, I see them on Dr. Phil. They sat there. We still have a why. Everybody that knows anything about this case is all the whys, all the unanswered questions, right? So, and they're there. We all have them. And so when you hear somebody throw out their thought, opinion, or even a theory, as long as that theory is not taking away from the facts in front of you, if your thought is he done it for this reason, or he done it for that reason, or she done it for this reason or that reason, you're doing nothing more or nothing less than what Rourke done, standing in that courtroom, and everybody thought he was amazing for that, okay? So what is the difference? As long as you're not throwing extra bullshit in to your thought or opinion that's not coming from these facts right here, then you're doing nothing wrong. So when I throw my thoughts and opinions out there, I'm not accusing nothing. I'm not saying I know, because I'll tell you, I don't know. But I do have thoughts and I do have opinions, and I am human. And so don't come jumping the random person for their thoughts and opinions when these thoughts and opinions happen every day in the legal world. You have to have them. I've even been in a courtroom and I have heard the attorney against me stand up and use their closing arguments, and they would say straight lies about me. I mean, they really would. They would sit there and say, and the only reason she's doing this is because blah, blah, blah. Okay, bullshit. Bullshit. That is not the only reason I'm doing this or that. But at the same time, this is their thought or opinion, and they're standing right in front of the judge doing it. So obviously, it's okay as long as you're going off of the facts, and from those facts you form a thought and opinion. That is the only damn way to ever solve a circumstantial evidence case. You have to do that. Don't go way out and go, some far out limb and go, well, I think he was poisoning her with antifreeze or something like that. That's an example, obviously. Don't do that, because there's no facts of antifreeze in this, okay? There's not. So those kind of things are kind of like theories, and you can do it, but you shouldn't. And I don't. I try to stick with whatever the facts are. I just form my thoughts and opinions off of those facts. And when you do that, and if somebody jumps on you for doing that, then you're not the one out of line. They are. Period. I didn't see the judge jump on Rourke and say, wait a minute, can you prove to me that the reason he separated them is because he wanted them separated in death? Can you prove that to me? No, he couldn't prove that to him. But he could show him in the discovery where they were separated. But Rourke's opinion as to why he separated them was because he wanted them separated even in death. And there's several more things that Rourke threw out there that was his thought, theory, and opinion. But that's how you have to do these kind of cases. You just don't have a choice. Stick with the facts, form your thoughts and opinion from those facts, and you're doing nothing wrong. Okay, sorry about that long rant, but it's just a fact. Kessinger does not recall any odd text messages on Sunday, August the 12th. On Monday, Kessinger left work at approximately 3 p.m. and she believes she text messaged Watts at around 3:45 p.m. Watts and Kessinger spoke Monday night, and he sounded scared and concerned about his kids. He did not discuss any missing items at the house, anything odd, or any signs of a struggle. Kessinger and Watts traded some additional text messages on Tuesday, August the 14th. Kessinger became fed up with Watts and deleted her text messages with Watts on August the 14th, 2018. Kessinger would be willing to provide her cell phone for forensic extraction if needed. Kessinger recalled that Watts spoke about his wife with a civil manner and said she was a good mother. Watts was always excited to talk about his daughters, and he never complained about anything negative. Instead, he explained that he and his wife were no longer connected and they had financial differences. Watts explained that he did not want to fix his marriage and there was no fixing it. Kessinger never met Watts's family, but she did see their photographs at Watts's home when she went to his home around the second week of July. This was the only time Kessinger recalled visiting Watts' home, and she only stayed approximately 15 minutes. Well, there again, we know that was a lie because we know damn well she was there at least twice, because she later came up and admitted that, because I personally think the reason she went ahead and admitted that is because she was afraid that they was going to find it on her phone ping. That's what I think. And this part I will never believe. Kessinger did not know that Watts's wife was pregnant until she had seen media reports about the pregnancy associated with the missing persons report on August the 14th. I will never believe that, because we all know that. Sure, looked at their social medias. We know that. I mean, who wouldn't? She did. Kessinger asked Watts about the baby, and he stated that the child was not his. Watts further stated that he did not want to ruin anything Kessinger and Watts had going. Kessinger told Watts that she knew the child was his and explained that it was okay. Watts finally admitted the child was his. Kessinger could not remember any additional lies Watts may have told her. Wow. Okay, she can't remember any additional ones right now, but within the next few days, she just seems to know his whole life story. Totally, completely, everything about him. Plumb down to the macros he puts in his body, everything about him. How much weight he's lost, I mean, everything. But yeah, right now, she really can't remember any more lies he told her. Ridiculous. Kessinger had asked Watts what had happened and where his family may be, and he had responded that he did not know. Kessinger does not think Watts would have harmed them. Watts told Kessinger that he had a conversation with his wife on the morning of August the 13th. Watts's wife had text messaged Chris asking him to wake her up before he went to work. Watts's wife told him that the baby she was carrying was not his. She told Watts that she would be taking the kids that day. Watts did not describe any arguments that day to Kessinger. Kessinger had heard Watts discuss his friend, Mark, last name unknown, in or around San Diego, California, and Nick in the Denver metro area. Beyond these two individuals, Kessinger was not aware of identities of Watts' friends or associates, but she believed Watts and his wife had a number of couples friends. Kessinger considers Watts to be an introvert, and his hobbies are cars and working out. Kessinger knew that Watts worked out using equipment in his basement. Kessinger worked out at a gym, and the two never worked out together. Kessinger never saw Watts become angry or make threatening statements, and she had never observed another side of Watts. Kessinger does not believe Watts owns weapons, and discussions she had with him indicated that he did not view owning weapons or multiple weapons favorably. Watts never mentioned any type of traumatic upbringing, and he discussed living in North Carolina some, and he explained that he had decided to move to Colorado after visiting friends living in the state. Trip to North Carolina. His wife initially traveled by herself, and he had traveled to meet her. Kessinger does not maintain social media accounts. She has work and personal email accounts, but communication with Watts with these accounts was minimal. Kessinger advised that she was available for future contact and to assist investigators should it become necessary. And here is the notes that they took to make that report. And of course, this is the cover for her report. And then we're going into the interview of Chad Mcneal. And he was also interviewed at Anadarko Petroleum. And Mcneal is an Anadarko field coordinator, and he has known Christopher Watts for little more than a year. Approximately a year ago, he transferred to Texas for work, but he returned to the Platteville office on or about August the 6th. During his time in Texas, Watts and Troy McCoy assumed Mcneal's area of responsibility within Anadarko oil field around Platteville, Colorado. This area includes E40 batteries south and east of Weld County Road 22 to Rogan, Colorado, and Denver International Airport. Mcneal recalled that Watts talked the world of his two daughters. Since returning to Colorado, Mcneal had heard Watts talk about his new baby. Mcneal described Watts as being well liked. He did not have issues with other individuals, and Mcneal was not aware of Watts having any enemies. Mcneal was not aware of any issues between his wife or other individuals, and Mcneal was aware that Watts' daughter had some health issues. On Monday, August the 13th, 2018, Mcneal was assigned to an oil battery called Survey 319, which was located north of Rogan, Colorado. Mcneal recalled that he received a text message from Watts at approximately 6:15 a.m. stating that Watts was at the site. Mcneal provided consent for interviewing agents to review the photographed text messages exchanged between Mcneal and Watts. The messages are electronically maintained with this document. The actual time of this text message stating, "You headed out to Survey, I'm out here," was 6:41 a.m. Mcneal arrived at Survey 319 with Melissa Parrish at approximately 8 a.m. Mcneal and Parrish drove separately in their work trucks, but they arrived at the Battery together. Watts appeared to be normal, which is described as nice, quiet, and pleasant. Mcneal also described Watts as a hard worker who gets things done. Mcneal noted that Watts's pants were tucked into his boots, and Mcneal made a joke about that. Watts appeared to take the joke in good humor, and Watts was wearing blue fire-resistant shirt and pants. Survey 319 is described as a standard-sized site of approximately a half an acre containing 2 tanks, a separator, and a pump. Mcneal, Parrish, and Watts, Troy McCoy worked on Survey 319 for a while, then left to work on Union Pacific Railroad Company 1029. At UPRC 1029, the operators met Cody Roberts. Roberts had reported a leak on Survey 319 the previous Friday, August the 10th, but he began his day at 1029. While at UPRC 1029, Watts began talking on his telephone. Mcneal learned that some type of security alarms were activating at Watts's home. Watts explained that a neighbor was at his front door and was looking at his phone. Watts took approximately 5 or 6 calls while standing near McCoy's truck. Watts appeared worried and frustrated about the alarm. Watts stated something to the effect of, "Something is not right. I have to go check it out." And he left UPRC 1029 at approximately noon to go check on his house. At approximately 3:23 p.m., Mcneal called Watts to ask how Watts was doing. Mcneal joked and asked something to the effect of, "Did you catch the robber?" And Watts replied that his family was missing. Mcneal offered assistance if Watts needed anything. Mcneal did not recall Watts making any odd comments during the day or during follow-up conversations. Mcneal was provided contact information for interviewing agents, and he was asked to call if he recalled additional information. Later, on August the 15th, Ryder called Mcneal asking for additional directions to Survey 319. Mcneal provided the requested information and also advised that he had recalled some additional information. On Monday, August the 13th, Mcneal had observed Watts wearing old boots with his pants tucked in, as previously stated. Mcneal thought the pants being tucked into the boots was unusual, but he was also told by Troy McCoy that Watts had a new pair of boots that he had been wearing. Watts was not wearing a new pair of boots on Monday. Mcneal also recalled Watts complaining that he was hot when Mcneal and Parrish arrived. Mcneal remarked that this complaint was odd, as it was only around 8 a.m., and Mcneal did not recall it being very warm. So Chris was complaining about it being very hot, but I've heard that the temperature there that morning was like in the lower 50s, so I think actually it was, just to be technical, it was 56 degrees that morning, so I guess that's why he kind of assumed that that was odd, that he was, hell, I'm cold if it's 56 degrees. I get cold if below 60, really. I'm just very cold-natured, but anyway. Mcneal did not recall seeing any perspiration or stains on Watts' clothing. Mcneal did not recall if Watts had performed any work on the site by the time Mcneal and Parrish had arrived. And that is the end of his report. And here is the notes that was taken for his said report. and they all look pretty basically exactly what I just read. The FBI does a really good job with their reports and notes, just saying. From Decano Police Department, 817. The address of occurrence is 2825 Saratoga Trail. They're assisting another agency. And the report goes as follows. On 8/17/2018 at approximately 13, and that would be 1:35 p.m., I was asked by Officer Davis with Frederick Police Department to assist with a burglary in process at 2825 Saratoga Trail. Weld County Communications advised that there were multiple people in the house taking pictures, and the reporting party, a neighbor, said that he didn't think they had permission to be in the residence. I was advised by responding officers that the individuals in the house might be an investigation team from the DA's office. Upon arrival, a male identifying himself as the reporting party contacted me and said that he went up to the door and knocked, but the individuals inside would not open the door. I looked through the front window by the door and saw several people walking around and several tubs of equipment on the floor. A male opened the door and advised that he was with Christopher Watts' defense team. Frederick officers arrived shortly after I made contact at the door. The male asked for us to come inside so we were not in earshot of the news cameras that were set up on the street. Officer Davis asked me to call the Weld County District Attorney's Office to see if the defense team was allowed to be in the house while they contacted the defense team. I spoke to the District Attorney Investigator Kathy H., and she advised that the house had been released as a crime scene and the defense team was allowed to be there. I relayed the information to the Frederick officer and I cleared the scene. My actions were recorded on the body camera. Nothing further at this time. Jesse Lambert. And of course, here is his notes. No, this is Amanda Thayer, 8:15. So this is going to be notes from Amanda's interview that we read earlier. Yeah, this is definitely what this is. Like I told you in the very beginning, a lot of this discovery is definitely not in order. It's just here and there and moved around, and so yeah, so as you see here, this is from Amanda's interview, and we read that way on up there. So okay, this is from 8:14 through 8:15. S.A. Hoyland reached out to the various corporations listed below under emergency exception as outlined by Colorado State. Following information and records were obtained pursuant to the extingent request. Unless noted otherwise, the request for data went back to 8/12/18. Chris and Shanann Watts' personal emails see below. No device identifiers on Echo. Audio content captured by that device, along with logs of activity on the device. Identification number P logs. Received. Device identifiers to include IMEI and cell phone number. IP logs account information for her Apple account tied to Shanann King. Follow on request to this, prompted by their suggestion, was to provide all the pictures saved to her company Apple. Request to Chris Watts' Apple Watch. Identification number, serial number. Requested information, geolocation information tied to his Apple Watch, subscriber info, and IP logs. Item number 4, company AT&T requests 1, his and her cell phone records. Account identifier, his personal cell, her personal cell. Requested info, CDR records for voice, SMS, and data to include cell location data, NELOS report and subscriber information. Received all requested above. Item number 5, company AT&T, request number 2, her Apple Watch and cell records. Account identifier, requested info CDR records for voice, SMS, and data to include cell location data, NELOS reports, and subscriber information. Received all requested above. Item number 6, company Facebook. Account identifier Shanann Watts. Requested information, subscriber information, last login location, login IPs, assisted phone number, financial history, identities of all devices which have logged into her account to include last date and time, whether or not those devices can be tied to a separate Facebook account, GPS location, history of the device. All requested above except GPS location history. Okay, this is what all they received from Facebook. Everything they requested above except the GPS location history and accounts tied to devices used to log into her account. Said data was unavailable. Separately, a preservation letter was submitted for Chris' deactivated account tied to his phone number. Item number 7, company Google. 2 accounts, same request. Account identifier Chris Lee Watts Gmail and Shanann King. Basic information, subscriber info, last login account, login IPs, associated accounts, and precise location information to include GPS. All requested above except location data as non-existed. Item number 8, company Verizon. Request number 1, his work phone. Account identifier. Requested information, CDR records for voice, SMS, and data to include cell location data, RTT reports, subscriber information, and a follow on request to this original request, text messages, content for the past 7 days. Received all requested above. Item number 9, Verizon. Request number 2, Nicole Kessinger. Requested information, CDR records for voice, SMS, and data to include cell location data, RTT reports, subscriber information, and text message content for the past 7 days. Received all requested above. Item number 10, Other. Anadarko provided GPS data related to their corporate vehicles to S.A. Hoyland's knowledge, had been doing it without requiring any court order or without the future promise of one. S.A. Hoyland was not the individual who originally spoke to them, but began to be copied on emails with GPS data. Due to the sheer size of the relevant records received, it cannot be loaded electronically into Centennial. A DVD of all the files is physically maintained in a FD 340. A copy of this disc was provided to the investigator of the Weld County District Attorney's Office and Detective Dave Baumover with the Frederick Police Department. And this is going to be the cover sheet for everything that they requested from these companies, and this is a storing for all of the records they received. This is the cover of that. Okay, we're going to stop right here. We're going into Ronnie Watts' interview with the FBI. So, hope you all enjoyed this, and if you did, please give us a thumbs up if you learned anything new. I don't really remember learning a lot new from this one, but at the same time, it's still very interesting, and nobody can tell you now, go read the discovery, because you are reading the discovery. Y'all have a great day. This is Unjustified.